Welcome to the Financial Advocacy Podcast. I'm your host, David Kinder, the tax-exempt wealth guy, registered financial consultant, and charter life underwriter, and my co-hosts, Michael Moffat and Kurt Gibbs. This is a disclosure where we say you can't hold us accountable for any actions you take on your own, just like all financial entertainment shows. We are not providing legal, tax, or securities investment advice of any kind. We do provide general investment information for educational purposes only, and we will discuss alternative financial strategies that do not contain or include securities. You can view all of our disclosures and disclaimers at our website at www.financialadvocacypodcast.com. Look both ways for across the street. Let's get started. All right, welcome back to the Financial Advocacy Podcast. Kurt, Happy New Year. Glad to see you this year.
Yes, Happy New Year to you as well.
He's live.
He's live, and he's here live and in person. Well, you know, is it live or is it Memorex, if anybody is old enough to remember that commercial. So last week, what do we got here? So last week or whatever, hey, Alonzo, glad to see you, my friend.
What's up, Alonzo?
Started thinking about what should our next few weeks of content be, and there's a couple of trends that kind of showed up a little bit. So first, I'm going to share my screen real quick because this has been interesting, and quite frankly, it's the thorn in Mike's side. So I'm going to share my screen. Here it is. This calculator video, I did this almost 2 years ago, and it has been my top producing video for the year last year. And so we get like a summary, you know, that YouTube sends to me, and I keep sending it out, and that calculator is always number one. And Mike, tell me what you think of that, of hearing that every week.
I just keep saying we keep getting beaten by a calculator. I mean, it's pretty embarrassing. So with that being said, we need all of you guys to like, share, subscribe, all the fun stuff, so we can finally beat this stupid calculator. All right, so let's get that going.
He hates this calculator video. So what's fun is that it's had 9,000 views since I've done it. And why is it taking off? Well, one reason I have to believe is that there's financial professionals that want to understand that thing. And in that video, I explained that calculator works differently. It's not 2 + 2 = 4. It's 2 enter 2 plus. It's this different way of putting things in. So sometimes when people get it for the first time, they don't know what to make of it. Having a quick intro video, that's nice. In fact, it was requested by someone in the Facebook group, said, hey, could someone show me how this thing works? And so I did that. It's like 12, 13-minute video. What's cool is that my channel is monetized. I have made enough to pay for the calculator because I had to replace it recently. So, you know, that more than paid for it. That's always a nice monetary good decision. But the second reason that came up, quite frankly, I saw this on TikTok, and I know TikTok's going to be banned and whatever is going to happen to that platform. I don't know what's going to happen, but I stole this video from there, and I couldn't believe this thing existed. This is a Dave Ramsey clip, but it has nothing to do with Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey would have responded the way any one of us would have responded. I got to play this thing, so here we go.
I didn't know we needed to file taxes, and we currently owe the IRS $600,000.
Good Lord, how did that happen?
Yes. We just thought that they filed themselves, to be honest. And we both are self-employed. So we just thought it was deducted out of our pay already. So
For how many years?
It's been about 10 years.
So you finally started filing, and then
Yes.
you end up with try to stay out of jail because not filing is criminal, and so you go and file, and now they give you the total, and it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, but no one really told us that, you know, we had to keep money aside for taxes. So I just don't really see how it's our fault.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That was a whole new level of ignorance of the law is not a defense. I was like, I can't believe that these kinds of people are out there.
I just think it's interesting whose show they listen to.
Hey, obviously, it's gonna. If it's not viral, it should be viral. Just to get the message out there that you really do need to file your taxes every single year. There is a level of income, and it's so minuscule where you don't have to file your tax. I think it's like $1,500. If you have $1,500 or less of actual income, you don't even have to file. So there is that level. But after that, no, you've got to file your taxes. And ignorance of the law is not an excuse. So I can't believe that, but I thought, gee, if those people kind of exist and yet that calculator video is kind of taken up, why don't we do a financial literacy kind of program, more or less, and just share some thoughts and ideas. And that's, in a way, let's just share what's out there. Let's share why people should consider financial literacy, why we should even have a course in the first place. And I actually did this for the local county library about 2.5 years ago, and I have a rough outline of what I had talked about back then. And it was the James Core. If you're listening, thank you. I appreciate that. He's my my local brother, more or less, from another mother. He's here in the Riverside area, and for some reason, and he could blame his company, New York Life, he could not be allowed to do the course, to do the class that I think he solicited the library to do. They wanted him, I think, to come up with something that was pre-done, and I think even went to the FDIC to get theirs, and it was going to take too long, whatever. So he offered it to me, since I don't have those requirements to meet from anybody other than don't say anything stupid in writing. So I took it on, and they gave me kind of an outline of what they were looking for. I'm like, I could talk about this stuff all day long. But what's interesting is that, yeah, financial literacy, it's not really taught in schools. And now it is. There are certain states that have passed laws that now they're going to be teaching financial literacy, which is one reason why that calculator is blowing up. There are schools, there are teachers in high schools, like in Florida and I think in California starting next year. I don't remember when they're going to start this thing. And they need to know how to use a financial calculator, need to know how to teach the class. Now, admittedly, when I was in high school, we had a class that was called Adult Living. And I forgot the name of this teacher. She was a sweetheart, but I forgot her name. I got my yearbook somewhere, but I'm not going to look it up now. And they taught basic things like, here's how you write a check. Here's how you balance a checkbook. Back when checks were still a thing, I mean, no one uses those things anymore. The fact that you do need to pay taxes. Now, I don't think they went through a whole lot on tax planning and tax filing or anything like that, but just enough to know that if you're at a job and you're going to have taxes withheld, you need to file your taxes every year, even though you're a minor. So if you're 16 years old and you're working a job, you still have to file your taxes. Now, you'll probably be bundled in with your parents. But you're 16, 17 years old and you've got a job, you need to file your taxes. And there's all kinds of rules, laws, regulations, all that stuff that go into that. So financial literacy, first of all, it's keeping you out of trouble. That's the first part. And the second part is that there's so many things out there in the financial world. And we're going to go through a particular list of these things. But if we don't know enough about how things work, we could be taken advantage of. Right? It would be so easy to do. I mean, often we say there's two tax codes out there. There's one for the informed and one for the uninformed. It's the exact same tax code. The question is, which one is going to use you and which one are you going to use for your advantage? It's the same thing with financial literacy, same thing with borrowing, same thing with, how you use your money and such. So all of that, if we want to make sure that we're on the winning side as best as we can, the more that we understand how all these things work and ideally how they all work together, the better off we could be. And that's where I think financial literacy comes in, because, you get that idiot who unfortunately didn't file her taxes, self-employed, didn't file taxes. Yeah, it's a whole different level. I could have sworn I heard a sigh there. But anyway, so now financial literacy is a little bit different from financial planning. Financial planning is being proactive with planning for the future you want to create and in protecting your situation as it is today. And a lot of that has to do with investments and insurance. And I want to talk real briefly how that came about as well, because financial planning wasn't a thing 60 years ago. You guys familiar with Lauren Dutton and that story? Kurt's nodding his head, yes. Mike, you're nodding your head, yes. Good, you're faking it. Okay. Financial planning came about as a new profession, and I'm going to give you both sides of this thing. It came about because salespeople didn't want to be held to the economy for how well their sales are doing. And so they all got together. And so I'll share my screen here. Lauren Dutton is known as the father of financial planning. And so what happened is that these salespeople were tired of leaving their financial fate to the roller coaster economy and sitting idly by without a prayer. And so like, well, what can we do about this? So it was December of 1969. So we're looking at 55 years, whatever the math is. And Lauren Dutton was not an insurance agent, was not an investment advisor. In fact, he was just a salesperson, but he was very good. He actually taught salesmanship, and he taught people how to advocate for people to be better off. And yet by doing so through the sale of our products and services. So that's where financial planning originally came about. And so even today, there is the Lauren Dutton Lifetime Achievement Award. This is offered by one of the associations I'm a member of. And I love it. It's a very noble calling. So it's here. I'm going to zoom in here because this is pretty good. Having been a successful businessman, although never a financial consultant, his comments were from the heart. He used his experience to frankly explain back then what we recognize now, that planning is not separate from the sale of insurance and investment products, but are different roots of the common tree. Products are necessary elements in the implementation of a financial plan. Salesmanship, the proper ethical use of salesmanship, it's unfortunate how the word sales has been derided today, but I always got to clarify. Salesmanship should be taught by the managers and trainers of the financial services industry, and the ethical sale of financial products and the delivery of competent advice is a very noble calling. But in order to make sure that we are all making quality decisions, we have to have enough financial literacy so we even know what kinds of questions to ask of those people that are offering such advice. So let me remove that here. So what is financial planning? Lauren Dutton's definition of financial planning is helping average people to do a better job of spending, saving, investing, insuring, and planning wisely for the future for financial independence and peace of mind. Now, unfortunately, it seems like most people who consider themselves financial planners only do one of those 5 things, maybe 2. And that is the investment part, right? Most people who claim that they're certified financial planners and such, that's all they do. And often that introduces a little bit too much risk into someone's financial situation, depending on the stage of life that they're in. Back when I was at a credit union, I was an investment advisor there, and our minimum at the time was that you need to have $10,000 or more of investable assets for us to work with you. I shudder now thinking about the things I did back then. Not ethical, well, in a way, ethically. Not that I was getting away with something, but that the requirements were so low. I wish that we would have had a little bit of a more stringent approach to that. So anyway, I'm kind of getting a little bit off on a tangent there, but that's financial planning, partly also because, and what's interesting is the timing of all this. Financial planning became a profession, essentially starting in 1969. And what happened a few years later is ERISA came into being. Now, ERISA is the Employee Retirement Income Security Act or Savings Act, one of them, whatever it stands for. And these are the laws that govern qualified retirement plans, pension plans, 401k plans, all those types of plans. And companies began to transition from pension plans, which are defined benefit plans. The longer you work at a company, the higher your earnings are, the more that you could retire with a pension plan, which is guaranteed income for the rest of your life, with probably a cost of living adjustment increase, with that plan. And now it becomes defined contribution plan, which is what 401ks do, where you get to retire with whatever you set aside. And the employer will help you a little bit. There's usually that match. And unfortunately, the good news is that those plans are portable. They're, so because we're not always working at the same companies for 20, 30, 40 years. So the good news is you can move it from one plan to another. The bad news is that you don't have the same kind of security in retirement as you once did unless you plan in advance for it. But out of all of that, and I probably already went on a tangent, because if I was talking to high school students right now, they'd be like, what in the heck are you talking about? And I'd probably be losing them already. In fact, I did a thing. You guys familiar with Junior Achievement? Is that out there where you guys are at? So Kurt nodded his head yes. So junior achievement is kind of an economic and other skill set development type of programs. And I was a volunteer at one at a high school, and we taught. I think it was the Financial Planning Island or amusement park. I forgot what the program was, but it was a fun way to kind of teach some of the basics of some budgeting, of making borrowing decisions, making wise financial decision making in the first place. There's a lot of factors that went into that, like, and quite frankly, one of the other best really good tools is Monopoly. If you're going to play Monopoly, if you're actually going to play to win, and I'm not talking about the evil capitalist side of Monopoly. I'm talking about the fact that when do you buy certain properties? When do you develop them up? When do you time your cash flow to make sure that you're taking advantage of the right kinds of opportunities around the board? All of that plays a factor. And so there's so much that goes into those things that it makes it a very interesting game. Then it's more fun when you bankrupt your family, but that's a whole nother side. And that's where the divorces happen and the family fights. I think there's still the argument here in my family with my folks, because I think my mom landed on Marvin Gardens and I think my dad owned it, and just said, okay, pay up. There's the hotel, always fun stories there, but the financial literacy is making wise decisions, especially with spending money, saving money. And we're going to start probably next week when we're talking about borrowing. Some of the terminology with that. Most people don't know there's 3 different interest rates on a credit card. And when you have 3 different interest rates on a credit card, how is your payment applied to those credit cards? So there's certain things that there's 3 different rates. Yeah, there's 3 different rates. So when someone asks you, what's your rate on your credit card? You should be wondering, which one do you want to hear about? My balance transfer, my purchases, or my cash advance rate? There's so many different facets. And the question, if you're not exposed to that, you might just say, oh, I got a credit card. And that credit card can sink you depending on how well it's used. All right, I did a whole lot of talking here. All right, guys, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I think, back to your initial point, talking about when things changed and when it became, a planning concept and a literacy concept is kind of where, if you will, the wheels began to really kind of fall off with the unknown of not knowing what to do because they simply didn't understand. I think the industry done a great job at complicating that for all of us. From day one, starting way back to 1969 or whenever you want to say that this kind of officially transitioned to a planning phase. Because I mean, how can you plan for something if you're not if there's not enough literacy about what it is to make an informed decision, just like with 401ks or qualified plans or in today's market, so many people, millions of people, they feel like that if they contribute to that, that's all they have to do is contribute to that. And it's going to take care of itself. And, 40 years later, they're going to be where they want to be. And as we know, that's just definitely not the reality of it. As that short little video clip, that relates to taxes is kind of along the same line. It's just, you've got to be informed and you've got to make better decisions on educating yourself, and the ability to do that is, dependent on you. It's not someone else's responsibility.
Yes, we've transitioned from employer-based financial planning to individual-based financial planning. It's not up to our employers anymore.
And it's gotten so complicated because, it's like picking which path do you want to choose? I mean, there's so many different avenues and ways that you can go. And now you complicate things with, Bitcoin and gold and silver, which has been around forever, but, they complicate it and they spin it as a, as an investment, or now's a better time to be in the market, for that or for this. It's just there's a play on everything, and most of it's so far from the truth. We've just gotten way away from that, from what grandparents and things like that were doing with their money. You go back to some of the icons and real pillars of the industry. They weren't investment people. if you want to label them. They weren't doing financial planning. They were educating people on, here's where you're at, and here's where you need to be, and here's what you need to do to get there. And we've just gotten away from that. I think parts of the industry now are kind of coming back full circle to that, and kind of starting to do that a little bit better than they did some years back. But it's just way too many choices, and we've complicated the process too much.
Yeah, a lot of choices, a lot of noise out there, which is kind of one reason why I've written my blog articles. One reason why we're doing this podcast. If there's going to be a whole bunch of noise out there, we might as well be part of it, right? And let's see if we could bring some semblance of sanity out there on it. But when we look over time, let's look at the media influences on some of this stuff. What was it? What's that show? Father Knows Best. I think that was it. The father was a New York Life agent, and so he was a pillar of the community. Then over time, we've got all these other sales, Wall Street, right? I'm talking about the original 1987 movie of Wall Street. We got Boiler Room and such, which looks like at stockbrokers as the stock monkeys, whatever. They're just pitching to try to collect on a commission kind of a thing, and sometimes unethically. At least that's what it was shown up. We've got the Bernie Madoff out there, that really destroyed things. And that's the image of people in financial services. Now, granted, I think I remember hearing this once. Someone was going to do a reality show on financial planning, and the problem is it's not sexy, right? Unless you can get real-time results, what's the point, right? Especially for a reality show. You're not going to get some sexy results right away. And if you did, it's some miraculous thing. They happen to pick a stock or a mutual fund or a bond or whatever at a low point, and they happen to grow. And we call that usually getting lucky.
Well, and I was just about to say, just go back, I don't know how many, you don't have to pick a year, but, to make this a reality statement, but look at all the indexes you've got to choose from. If you just if you just wanted to just pick an annuity, for instance, and you wanted to go into the S&P, and that's, you can go into the S&P and probably, I don't know, 15 or 20 different avenues within the S&P now to carve out a sector of it or something. And over a 10-year period, you've got this guy that's telling you what it's done for this and what it's done for that. And it's just we've just taken the pie and we've cut it into so many slices that it's just no wonder there's confusion.
I'm confused by most of that stuff.
Yeah.
Cheryl Moore, of course, we all know who she is, and she tracks how many indexes and everything are just for annuities. And for these aren't even, they're not really securities. They're indexed options available for fixed index annuities. And there's like 140 of them. How is anybody in the right mind supposed to keep track of those things? Which is why I generally don't.
It's insane.
And
it's just insane.
I'll figure that all out later. I mean, of everything that we do, I'll say collectively everything that we do, of everything, the rate of return is not the most important facet. And even if it was, to try to keep track of all that stuff, it's always a losing game. If you consider, and this is the biggest misnomer about financial planning, is that financial planning is all about rate of return and investment returns and such. And that's not the case at all. Which is why I love it. I'm going to share it on screen again. Lauren Dutton's definition is so true. It's the fundamentals. Average people to save, spend, invest, insure, and plan wisely for the future. And making quality decisions that fit for them, for where they're at in life. Now, one of the things that often bothered me, because I got started with my career at a credit union, and we primarily met with people who were retiring from a credit union. They're going to retire with their pension. And usually it's also a lump sum. They could roll that pension out and, take control of it and put it where they want. They have their 401k and then whatever other investment accounts that they have, we coordinate all of that stuff. And that's where our bigger paychecks come from, right? But I also often had to think that if those people would have come to us 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years before that decision, how much better off could they have been along the entire way? Planning is all about looking at the future and saying the future belongs to us, belongs to me. I need to make it. If it is to be, it's up to me. What can I do and should be doing today to secure the future I want to have for the future? That's financial planning. And then we take a look at, because insurance is part of that. And obviously we're an insurance-based podcast. And if we look at insurance for the protection side, that's not even consider the tax side of it and everything. That's wonderful, but that's a whole different level. In a way, that's an investment decision of where you're placing your assets. But let's look at it from a protection standpoint. If something happened to you today, do you want your income to continue to you and your family? That's part of financial literacy. That's part of financial planning to make sure that you have enough adequate protections in place. And so we'll cover that in another module, in another week. But the whole shifting of, we're no longer employer-based. And by the way, when we were employer-based advice, how long were we retired for? Life expectancies have risen dramatically over the past, let's say, 50 years. So maybe you're retired for 10 years. But you can expect to be in retirement for 20, maybe even 30 years. And if there's no pension plan and Social Security, we all have our doubts about that. Although I always quell that. I don't like to feed into that fear. Some people think, Social Security will not be around. No, it will be around. The problem is that it'll be around in one form or another, and we don't know what's going to look like and which ages is it going to change for. I just turned 47 yesterday. I'm old enough to know better. So, my full retirement age is in 20 years. Okay. I never had to say that before, but in 20 years, I will reach my full retirement age. And, will it be around the same way it is? I doubt it's going to be better, other than my income increasing, paying taxes on that to make sure that, my benefits rise along with my income, because that's what it's going to be based on the FICA base. Okay, now I just went off on a tangent there.
Well, but, I'll say this about, what you're talking about with the pension plans. The pension plans, if you're fortunate enough to come across an individual that still currently has one, it's becoming the rarity, because so many of them are being phased out across the country, and in some states, especially the state dependent ones. And I think, Mike, you're in a state that has had to have, that shored up, from local, fire department, or not fire department, but, the fire sector, pension plans and things like that, because like you say, the age of people, you're living longer, and those pension plans weren't designed to do that. So, companies that do have them are having to, put in a lot more of their own money to keep those things shored up for the few individuals that are, still going to receive a benefit from a qualified pension plan. And for those that still have it, what an opportunity, that really some people have, opposed to maybe a newer or a younger person that's just, been in the workforce for, say, 10 or 15 years, who only have the ability to contribute to a Roth 401k or a standard 401k plan, when people that were, generations before had a defined benefit pension opportunity. They were, the 401k had maybe not been out, a long time, but long enough that there's, substantial assets that they've accumulated in that. And then with the Roth IRA and things like that. So you had 3 or 4 buckets, so to speak, of money that you could kind of pool from, to create really a retirement plan, if you will, it's not out there anymore. So, those that, and I'm fortunate enough to live in a state that there's the pension plans are still out there, with a lot of your bigger, paying employers and government plans. And it's just it's a gold mine of an opportunity for a client, as well as someone who's willing to educate a client on how you can, get out of a tax bucket with one pile of the money while you're spending the other, and creating spend down type accounts and different things. So, a lot of good information out there, and a lot of good tools to educate yourself on how you can do that if you still have that defined pension benefit. But for the majority, it's you're going to be taking on a different outlook when it gets to be that 20 or 30 years down the road. If you're like David and you're talking about 20 more years or so of having to come up with that income.
And Kurt, you're older than I am, so I'm sorry, I had to throw that out there.
It's okay, I am.
But it's just a fact. But Yeah, what's interesting though is that we're not expected to have pensions alone. We're not expected to have Social Security alone. And we'll cover this more in the retirement module. Where the 401k is not designed to be alone. It never was. In fact, the 401k has became a monster that got away from, was it Ted Bana? I think that was his name, that created the 401k out of the ERISA code. And if we don't take charge of what we're trying to do, we could wake up at retirement and realize, oh no, I wish I coulda, shoulda, woulda. And the earlier we get started on something, the better off your future will be. Which is why, when I'm teaching about objection handling, sometimes,
I wish I had
a little bit of sales.
Yeah, I wish I had more information to kind of, kind of behind the scenes of this with just us three to share this with you. But I had a gentleman about 4 or 5 years ago that was really by default was ultra conservative, had a pension plan, started a 401k plan when they first came out or was first introduced by his employer, and was so scared of the market and not knowing what to do with 15 or 10, 12, 15% of his income going into a 401k of what to do, that he put it all in the money market inside the 401k for the entire time.
Okay.
And what he did is he cut out all those dips. Yeah, he wasn't making those upswings of the big, but when it came time to retire, he basically had a defined pension benefit, and his 401k had pretty much worked simultaneously in the same way because of the minimum, rate of return that he was going to get on that bond or that money market type account. And, he was happy with that. And it was really interesting to see the accumulation of funds he had with really two conservative plans, which is why it's why we gravitate toward the insurance side of things so well, because it spins so much better than anything you can do, inside the market. And, we don't have to get deep in the weeds to know that. Your calculator will definitely spit that out and tell us the facts on that.
You're bringing it back to the calculator. Appreciate that. Everybody watch the calculator video. Okay. Mike doesn't want you to watch that. He wants this video to go better. But what's interesting is that he discovered that safety, protection, and guarantees of the money market, and technically money market funds are not protected that way, but generally they are. They do not want to be known to break the buck. It's $1 per share. That's the equivalent on those things. And he determined that not by design, but by default. He didn't search out all this stuff. He just accidentally went. Imagine it. Of course, he could have overcomplicated it and had less money to retire on. So it depends, right? Everything, It depends. We talked about, we've teased about renaming this podcast the It Depends podcast. It just depends on where you want to go, where you want to end up, what your risk tolerance is. And most people overestimate their risk tolerance. They think they can tolerate the risk, and really they can't. When the market takes a 20% dip and they realize their accounts took a 20% dip too, they don't like that.
Well, there's too many people, everybody wants to chase. And, I was over, prior to Christmas and after, the election results and November 5th, I can count on one hand the number of people that I had a conversation with that wanted to just, they wanted to wait and see what was going to happen after, after Trump goes into office, for instance. The market's going to, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. I think I'm just going to go ahead and stay put, and ride this thing a little bit longer. It's just everybody wants to, put that dice in their hands and hope they roll those sevens no matter what's going on. It's just it's amazing.
But that's the interesting thing. Only if they get those sevens, right?
Yeah.
But if you get that snake eyes, you're a problem.
Yeah, it's such a trick.
And then who do you blame? You blame the person that told you, "Oh, you roll for the 7. You got the snake eyes instead." Come on. Now, I appreciate you, Jim. Jim Ruda's watching, I guess, right here on YouTube. Sure. This is great, and I think this originally came from Mark Victor Hansen. If your upkeep exceeds if your income. I'm just going to read it from him. I try to remember the exact quote. But if your gross habits exceed your net income, your upkeep will become your downfall.
Yeah.
It is so simple. That's as simple. Yeah. I'm like, well, duh. Yeah. But some people need to be taught that. I mean, if you that's one of the traps of credit cards, right? Because it's so easy to overspend on credit cards. Now you got to pay that all back, which means you're going to live on less money while you're paying it back. That's assuming that you are paying it back. You wonder why credit cards have high interest rates. Well, because they have to offset the costs of risk of those that default on credit cards. So there's all of this stuff out there. But that's part of the biggest part is first getting a handle on whatever budget we have as best as we can. Now, let's also keep in mind that it's not just lifestyle, but it's also cost of living, right? Those are factors in there, which is one reason why, like here in California, if you're earning less than $50,000 a year, especially if you're a married couple, you're around the poverty line. And there's not a whole lot you can plan with. Now, every situation is going to be different. But at the same time, some people don't have a financial planning problem. They have an income problem. And solving the income problem would be more important to take care of, which would basically be investing in your own skills, investing in your own professional development, investing into maybe a side business. Very technically speaking, being on YouTube is a side business. I mean, I get a couple $100 every once in a while. It's not very much. You saw the calculator payout, right? $57. I have not made a whole lot on that for the past 2 years, even though it's my number one video. But it's something, right? I'm not going to turn down, monetization where I can get it. But, so you've got to have a certain minimum threshold. But then after that, what do you do with the money that you can take care of? When you get your tax refund, first of all, should you be getting a tax refund? Maybe you're sending the IRS too much money and you should be holding on to it and putting that to where you can. And hopefully you even out when you're filing your taxes. There's different things out there that I think that it's important for us as individuals to have our own control over our money, our own control over our budget, because we could do better with it than the government can. That's I've got a whole nother week about government economics. There's so much.
No, that goes back to the whole thing at the beginning here, what we're talking about with financial illiteracy, I guess, in high school, right? I mean, once you're a senior in high school, certainly this needs to be taught, because after you're a senior in high school, you're pretty much out on your own. So when you go, even if you go into college, you're going to most likely move away from your parents. You're going to be on your own. You're going to be getting credit card offers, car loans, financing school, all kinds of stuff. And you're going to start building that debt snowball, as Dave Ramsey calls it. And then depending on what kind of a job you get or a degree, now you have to start figuring out a way to pay all that off. So I think a lot of people start life out of college and out of high school kind of behind the 8 ball in some ways, because they already have so much debt accumulated that they have to try to pay off, that they're not actually able to save as much as they should or could, because they're stuck paying tremendous amounts of debt. And the funny thing is that a lot of times people don't even get jobs that they went to college for, unless maybe they're a doctor or an attorney or something, right? And even then, sometimes they don't do those things. So, but this financial literacy idea, teaching people how things work as maybe a senior in high school, how do loans work? What is a 401k? What is a Roth? What is a, individual brokerage account? How can you contribute to those? What are the tax consequences? What are the penalties for taking money out of them? How do the loans out of those things work? What are the risks involved? So if more of that stuff was taught, and it sounds like some states are starting to adopt some of that again more. That would be very helpful to a large majority of people. And I think maybe or maybe not, you'd see some of these income issues resolved, and people would be able to have more put away for their retirement than they do currently. And I think that if you just understood the consequences of the decisions that you're making now better, then that would help you make better decisions going into the future into how to plan for things, instead of just, I got to get a $250,000 loan because I got to go to college or whatever, and I need to buy $100,000 sports car to impress somebody, and I got to get this expensive apartment and this and that, right? So there's a lot of that goes on, and people end up in so much debt that they have trouble even to start saving at all to begin with. And certainly, go ahead, Kurt.
Well, yeah, and you think back, you guys are both, old enough. I mean, I definitely am, but you're old enough to remember. Think about how hard it was at one time to even get an application, or not an application, but paperwork in the mail, if you will, to fill out a credit card application. I can remember when you didn't see, and it's so readily available now. I mean, you might get 10 a week now, and you can and quite possibly qualify to have all 10 of those. I mean, money's so readily available now. Where the government prints it like it. Well, they just print it just to print it. So, it's no wonder situation is we're in the situation we're in because the government, can't seem to get anything right when it comes to balancing anything. And yet, you go back to the 80s when, it was hard to get a loan or you couldn't get the credit card offer. And now you're solicited by, 10 different spinoffs of one bank or a sister, subsidiary of 4 other banks. I mean, it goes back to that, planning and literacy thing. Kind of, it's we've just continued to slice that pie into so many pieces, and you have to just you got to get through it somehow and not be
right.
Not take advantage of.
And credit cards aren't bad, and using your credit isn't bad. They can be good and useful financial tools. The problem is that most people, I guess, when when your bank account is low and you're like, oh, you know what? I want to order Papa John's tonight. I'm just going to put it on my credit card. And then, a few days later, I really want this PlayStation 5 game. I don't have the money right now. I'm just going to put it on a credit card and this and that. And then before you know it, and you've got 10 of these credit card offers in the mail, and before you know it, you've racked up $5,000-$10,000 in credit card debt, and you have no way of paying it, and it's a 25% interest. Now all of a sudden you have no way of getting out of debt, basically, because it's like chips away at itself and it adds up slowly over time, and then before you realize it, you've got all this credit card debt on top of all the other debt you've already accumulated from a mortgage or a car loan or college student loans, and it becomes this problem. And so it's not necessarily the credit card company's fault, I guess. I mean, they're kind of predatory in a way because they keep offering you this stuff, but in a lot of sense, it's financial irresponsibility and understanding how these things work, and a lack of a self-control, I guess, to a certain degree.
Could be. Now, I was a banker at Wells Fargo Bank, obviously a national bank, and I used, as a banker, you thought it would be a position of authority. Not really. It's a sales position. You don't really realize that until after you're in it, because they measure you on how many checking accounts you open, how many new loan applications you do, home equity loan applications you do, credit card applications, stuff like that. And so while I thought I was going to be taking that job to learn how to give basic financial advice, well, that's sometimes part of it, but really it's all about how do we get more of wallet share in someone's household, more or less. And the mentality of credit cards, especially for college students, is let's help you build some credit. We're going to get you a starter credit card, usually like $500 limit. And there's pretty good faith that, you're a college student. I bet your parents will help you make that payment. You don't even need a job to get that credit card. You just need to be a student. So, yeah, we'll talk about that more. Not that it's predatory. I just tell students you need one credit card to start with, then start building that credit file, take good care of it. So that, when you build up that credit history, it can help you to get that apartment, help you to, get that car loan when you finally get the right job. In another week, we'll talk about education planning, and we'll talk about how to financially underwrite your degree. How do you make sure you're actually choosing a degree that has some demand? And strange enough, there's a government resource that help you figure it out, especially for parents. Because if parents are going to be co-signing on private student loans, you're on the hook. And here's what's interesting. If the student passes away, now thank goodness this is a rarity, But if the student dies, the parent is still on the hook. These private student loans are not forgiven at death like they are for public student loans, like from Navient or whatever it's called before. And believe me, I know because I've got 2 kids that I'm doing FAFSAs for. Hopefully we're just keeping to the FAFSAs. So anyway, it's just important to know all the different facets. How do we make informed decisions? I don't want to see a college student going to a university to get a PhD in philosophy when there isn't a philosophy plant factory that's being open. Actually, there probably is, and it depends on your government perspective and government viewpoints. They're promoting all kinds of propaganda. So, maybe that's the only job you can get. But other than teaching other PhDs in philosophy, you're not going to have very many marketable skills that degree applies to. Jim's still hanging on. Is financial literacy more about attitude than knowledge? Is emotional entitlement and self-satisfaction a big danger? There's that title again. It depends. I'm gonna keep saying that. I think part of it first is taking a fiscal responsibility. I almost said fiduciary, but that's not it. Fiduciary is relating advice to another person, but it's stewardship. That's the word I wanted. Taking stewardship over the resources and the financial resources that we have been blessed with, to try to make the wisest use of those resources as best as we can, especially in the moment. Kurt, you mentioned Papa John's. I swear, every once in a while, okay, all right. Mike mentioned Papa John's, and I'm like, every once in a while, I'm like, I want a pizza, and I'm gonna go in there, and I start to place the order, and I'm adding in. I'm like, that thing is $35 before the tip. You know what? I kind of like my money a little bit more. I know they want it, but I like it in my pocket a little bit more than sending it to them. So I'm like, I'd rather go to the grocery store.
And that doesn't include if you want to get it on DoorDash or something, and you have to pay a delivery surcharge on there. But I like Jim's point here, right? Because, and Jim, I appreciate you all the time. I like Jim Ruda. He's a good guy. But is it more about attitude than knowledge? I think it's a lot of both, right? I mean, you can have the knowledge, but your attitude could be, I don't care. I know that this is right, but I'm going to do something else anyway. Much like anything else, anything you could apply that to. But there is a lot of emotional entitlement. This is something I want, and I want it now, and self-entitlement comes into that too, where I feel like I have to have this thing, and I'm entitled to it, and so I'm just going to go out and buy it. And I think that so all of those things come into that.
It probably depends on how often that happens. And
exactly.
Quite frankly, at what scale? Now, if we did this with now Papa John's, again, I could see myself spending $50. Oh no, I can't see myself spending $50 because I keep adding it to cart, and I'm like, I can't do that. Appreciate you, Jim.
I love you too, Tim.
So I do that, and then I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna go for me, it's always eating out, and so for me, I just keep it more modern or moderate, I should say. I can't really see myself spending more than $15, which also means I better go out and get it myself rather than having it be delivered, because delivery always makes everything more expensive. It depends on how often it's getting away from you and at what scale. Now, if I'm feeling depressed, by the way, that's not negate emotional depression and things like that. And sometimes we're self-medicating through our spending.
Right.
That's a whole different issue. But it's recognizing, what are our habits doing? What are our habits causing us to do? And which path is this going to lead us down? Is this temporary? I mean, what was it? A couple of years ago, we're getting the roof replaced, and we were at an Airbnb, and I think that month I spent like $800 eating out. I added all up. I was like, oh crap, how did that all get away from me? But it was okay. I say that to myself. It's okay only because this is a temporary situation. Okay. Lately, the past couple of months, I've barely eaten out. I still do. I don't like to deny myself. And by the way, as part of being financial professionals, I would rather, if I had to go down the path of saying you have to give up everything you enjoy in life in order to make your financial plan work, I'm not expecting that sale, guys. I'm sorry. If I have to make you give up your In-N-Out burger, California speaking here, give up your In-N-Out burger and everything else that you do to make life worth living. Now, if you're having 10 Starbucks a day, all right, you've got an issue. And I might tell you that, but say, get that figured out first. Let me know in about 3 months. Maybe we'll start you over the term policy, if that. And I probably better not cash that commission check because I think that's a lapse waiting to happen. But, our habits will determine our futures as long as we're aware of where our habits are taking us. And so, yeah, of course, there's that emotional part. And there are always times where I give it. And usually it's food for me. It's not like I'm going to go down to the Lexus dealer every other week and buy another car. That's a whole different. Now, there's some people like that, but they can do that. I'm not one of those people yet.
And that's kind of that's kind of the point that I was getting at, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to go put this $30 order on my credit card because I want to eat out. And then, another couple days later, maybe you see, like I said, a video game that's $50 or $100 and you're like, oh, whatever, it's $100. I'll just put it on my card. And that's how the problem starts, because before, if you didn't have money to pay for it, then what makes you think when the bill comes due that you're going to have $300, $400, $500, whatever it is, just laying around to pay the bill? And now you got the compounding problem, and now you got the interest charges on top of that. So not that having a credit card is bad, and a lot of people, have credit cards and they just put their gas or their groceries on it or things like that they have already budgeted for. And that's a great way to use a credit card, and build your credit to use it to spend on things that you're going to buy anyway, like groceries, gas, whatever else, if you have you
get those reward points if that's important to people.
Right. So there's certainly places.
Don't let the cart lead the horse.
Don't let the tail wag the dog.
That too.
So there's certainly
so many things. Yeah.
There are certainly good uses for things like that, and there's good uses for loans, and there's good uses for all kinds of quote debt, right? But it has to be managed in an appropriate way and responsibly, and that's the whole thing. The borrower is always slave to the lender. So if you can't pay back the loan, you're automatically setting yourself up for failure and financial disaster. Yeah. So
that's a spiral waiting to happen. I mean, it's a little different than saying, like, I remember a clip of Shaq years ago, and he said he spends $1,000 a week on apps on his phone. I don't know how you could possibly do that. I don't think I've ever spent more than $100 total. By the way, I have a calculator app, so I'm just saying that, and I only paid that once.
You know what? That's funny you bring that up because that stupid calculator that's beating us right now, that's the most expensive app I've ever bought because you told me to buy it and learn how to use it. Yes, I did.
Well, you got to watch the calculator video again, and you just got to use it all the time. I can barely use any other calculator now because I use reverse Polish notation. Anyway, it's just making wise decisions and being okay with the consequences of them. But the thing is, what was it? Jim Rohn. So not Jim Ruta, Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn is a great educational business philosopher kind of a guy. Jim Rohn would say, I forgot the phrase. I should have written it down, but so good. The definition of failure is, I had it. Lapses of judgment repeated every day. And if you have the lapse of judgment repeated every day for 6 years, how long is it okay? And we've got to be able to catch ourselves finding our cycles and realize, okay, something's got to give. I've got to stop doing this. Maybe I could at least cut back in some way, but then save up that emergency fund. And then we got to figure out what's the best way to position you. And that's what a lot of financial planning is about, getting you in the proper position for where you're at in life. And so I'm going to go back here real quick because we are going to wrap up. But Robert Kiyosaki, another financial author, somewhat controversial because he really loves real estate. But he says there's only 3 kinds of financial plans. The first one is to be safe and secure. And really, that's kind of when you're first getting started, you get your first job, you got to, repay all the loans that we took out, all that stuff, making sure that you are safe and secure. You've got the insurance coverage, you're setting money aside, you're paying your debts. The second plan is to be comfortable, making sure you're building up assets for future retirement, use for today. Maybe you're going to start a business, whatever it's going to be. And then the third plan that he talks about is your plan to be rich. Now, this one's kind of funny because I've always maintained that financial planners do not make anybody rich. We help people with their plans. We help people to preserve what they've created. We help them to pass it on to the next generation, depending on what it is they're looking to accomplish. But we don't make people rich. And I call it kind of funny only because when I was looking up books, because I realized Lauren Dutton, who I mentioned at the very, very beginning, he wrote a few books back in the 80s. And so one of the first books he wrote, The Financial Planner, The New Professional, trying to make it as a professional that you should work with. But then he wrote this one, Financial Planning Can Make You Rich, and 33 case studies to prove it. I thought, well, fine. He had to have a book title that would contradict what I was going to say. But the thing is that without financial planning, where would you be when you cannot rely on anybody else? Now, government plans, again, Social Security will be around one form or another. You can count on it in some way, shape, or form, whatever that's going to look like. You got to be able to take charge of your retirement planning. You got to take charge of protecting your family. There's all these things, but it's not your employer's job anymore. Your employer may have group benefits. Take advantage of those, but those group benefits are only as good for as long as you work there. If you really want true safe security and guaranteed, you got to take care of it yourself. And you need, I believe, a qualified professional that will help guide you to making quality decisions based on where you're at in your life to make sure you can do and have the things that you want to have accomplished. Should everything go wrong and should everything go right?
Yeah.
Good, right?
And I was just going to say about the employer benefits. They're also only as good as your employer as long as they decide to offer them. Right? Because they can take those benefits away at any point. Not that they're likely going to, but they can, and they have that right. And there has been cases of employers taking away certain things. So those things can't always be counted on either. More than likely, they're not going to necessarily take away your 401k or something like that, but they could reduce the match, for example.
Yeah.
Or they could change.
That can be done.
They can change other aspects of things as well. So.
Well, we've had in recent years, like Sears ended their life insurance program for retirees.
Right.
Ended. I think it was another Alcoa. I forgot what the name was, but they also ended their life insurance for people who retired from their company. And there's been a lawsuit and things like that about that. But again, if you're relying on your employer, that's the danger of that.
For 5 years, I worked in a call center where employers, we're talking major companies, decided that they were going to drop their retirees from their group plan and give them I guess like a reimbursement account, I guess is a good word for it, to go into the open marketplace and purchase their own Medicare. They just dropped them from the employer plan. And they can do that. So group, benefits can change and they're great to have, but just be aware that they're not the end all be all. And that they can change at any time, and that's at the employer's discretion. Now, hopefully they get better and they don't do stuff like that. But in reality, companies want to make money, and if they can save money and look better
and just because the employer offers it doesn't mean that they're saying this is all you should have. Correct. They might offer something that is, here's something, we're offering a discount on whatever it is, but that doesn't mean that's everything that you should have. So just because you have it from your job doesn't mean that's the be all and end all. So anyway, we're going to be covering a lot of this over the next few weeks. So hopefully this is just a quick intro of financial literacy, financial planning. We're going to cover all of this in different weeks. And this should be eye-opening, I hope. We'll catch you all each and every week going forward. And thanks a lot. Make it a great day.
You have been listening to an episode of the Financial Advocacy Podcast. As a reminder, you can't hold us accountable for any actions you take on your own. Just like all financial entertainment shows, we are not providing legal, tax, or securities investment advice of any kind. We do provide general investment information for educational purposes only, and we will discuss alternative financial strategies that do not contain or include securities. You can view all of our disclosures and disclaimers at our website at www.financialadvocacypodcast.com. Look both ways for across the street. Thank you for listening, and make it a great day.